The third time Gray Brennan asked me to help with something that clearly didn't need two people, I finally understood. My best friend's older brother was finding excuses to be alone with me. What I didn't understand was why. I'd like to tell you I figured it out fast, that I was smart about it. I wasn't. I spent most of that summer explaining it away, the way you explain away a sound in the dark, because the alternative is admitting someone's there. I'm Eli. I was 24 that summer, and this is the story of 3 months at Harlow Lake that changed everything. But to tell it right, I have to start before the counting. Back when I was just a guy with no job, no plan, and a phone that almost never rang. That June, I was living in an apartment I could afford for exactly 2 more months, surrounded by moving boxes I'd never unpacked. 8 months in that place, and the boxes still sat where the movers dropped them, taped shut, like even my stuff was waiting to see if this life would take. I'd graduated in December, sent out 41 applications. I know it was 41, because counting things is what I do when I can't do anything else. Remember that. It matters later. The only thing in that apartment I'd actually unpacked was my father's camera. A Pentax, older than me, heavy as a brick, smelling faintly of the leather case he kept it in. My dad died when I was 16, and everything else of his went to storage or Goodwill or my mother's attic, but the camera came with me. I shot film on it the way some people go to church. Not often, but seriously. I was lying on the floor next to those boxes, holding the camera up to the ceiling light and checking the shutter click, that clean mechanical snap, the most reliable sound in my life when Charlie called. You have to understand about Charlie Brennan. 10 years of friendship since we were 14, and in all that time he has never once let a phone call start with hello. Okay, don't say no yet, he said. Legally, you have to hear the whole thing first. That's not how the law works. Summer, Harlow Lake, the lake house. Gray's fixing it up so my parents can rent it out, and he needs bodies, and you're a body. Free room, free food, my glorious company, and you get paid to hold boards while my brother frowns at them. Eli, buddy, you're unemployed in a sad apartment. I've seen it. There are boxes. The boxes are a system. The boxes are a cry for help. Come to the lake. Here's the thing about Charlie. He's the only person alive I'd call a best friend. He knows my coffee order, my dead dad, my worst haircut, the time I cried at a car commercial. 10 years of knowing me, and for all 10 of those years, I'd hidden the most important thing about myself from him. Never lied. Exactly. Just steered. Changed subjects. Let him assume. You can build a whole friendship on the truth and still keep one room locked, and I'd gotten so good at walking past that door, I almost forgot it was there. Almost. Fine, I said. I'll come. Almost. See, was that so hard? Pack the camera. The lake's stupid pretty at sunset. You'll lose your mind. I packed the camera first. Charlie picked me up in his ancient Civic, and we made it exactly 40 minutes before the car died on the shoulder of a county road with a sound like a spoon in a garbage disposal. Charlie called his brother, said, yeah, the noise again, okay, and hung up. Gray's coming, he said. Like that settled the universe. I'd met Gray Brennan maybe 5 times in 10 years, which tells you something, because I'd been to the Brennan's house hundreds of times. He was 8 years older, and he'd always been more rumor than person. The brother who moved away, the brother who came back. Charlie talked about everyone constantly, and about Gray he mostly just said, he's fine, he's Gray, which I'd never once thought about until that summer. The pickup that pulled up behind us was old and clean, which I'd learned was Gray all over. He got out, and my first honest thought was that he looked like he'd been built by somebody who took their time. Broad through the shoulders, forearms like he was smuggling rope under his skin, moving without any wasted motion. He didn't shake my hand, just nodded at me, once, the way you'd acknowledge weather. Then he picked up my suitcase, the one I'd dragged down 3 flights of stairs in 2 trips, and lifted it like a matchbox, one hand, into the truck bed. Charlie rode in the middle. He talked the entire 20 minutes, the rental plan, the boathouse roof, a girl named Dana from the marina, and Gray drove, and said, I counted, 9 words. I sat by the window, and the AC was blasting, and I was cold, and I didn't say anything, because saying I was cold to a man like that felt like admitting something. I crossed my arms. I didn't shiver. I'm almost sure I didn't shiver. And Gray, without looking over, without pausing whatever Charlie was saying, reached out and turned the vent away from me, one small angle of his wrist. Then his hand went back to the wheel. Charlie didn't notice. Charlie was mid-story. But I sat there with the cold air bending away from my body, and I remember thinking, clear as a bell, he wasn't even looking at me. How did he know? I told myself it was nothing. That's important. Every single time, I told myself it was nothing. The lake house sat on a rise above the water, cedar-sided, a screen porch running the length of it, a dock going out into water that turned copper at dusk. It was the kind of place that made my camera hand itch. Dinner that first night was burgers on the screen porch, and Charlie performed it like dinner theater, doing the voices, roasting me for photographing my plate, narrating his own condiment choices. Gray sat at the end of the table and ate, and said almost nothing. But I watch people. It's the photographer thing, or the shy thing, or both. And here's what I watched. Charlie, talking with his hands, grabbed the wrong plate off the counter, the one with the pasta salad his mother had sent up. And Gray, without a word, without breaking the rhythm of anything, reached over and swapped their plates, just switched them, kept eating. What? Charlie said, noticing. Walnuts, Gray said. That was it. Charlie's allergy. Charlie hadn't checked. Charlie never had to check, apparently, because someone at the table was checking for him and had been, I'd guess, his whole life. Charlie said, "Oh, sick, thanks," and rolled straight into the next story. And I sat there, quietly, rearranging everything I'd assumed. Because here's what I understood by the end of that dinner. The quietest person at the table was the one listening hardest. Charlie broadcast. Gray received. Every joke, every allergy, every empty glass. Gray caught all of it and never said a word about any of it. I thought, what else does he catch? I didn't know yet that I'd spend the whole summer finding out. The knock came at 6 the next morning. Not on Charlie's door, on mine. I opened it half asleep, and Gray stood in the hallway in a gray t-shirt and work jeans, already fully himself while I was still assembling. "Lumber run," he said. "Let Charlie sleep. He's useless before 10. That was the whole invitation. He was down the stairs before I answered, which meant, I guessed, that I'd answered. The lumber yard was 30 minutes out, and later, much later, I'd realized the obvious thing, which is that a man who'd been a carpenter for a decade did not need help buying wood. He had a truck with a bed and 2 arms that could each carry more than both of mine. But at 6 a.m. that first morning, I didn't think about any of that. I just rode along in the passenger seat, watching mist come off the fields, weirdly awake. The yard smelled like sap and sawdust, and Gray moved through it like other men move through their own kitchens. He'd run a hand down a board and reject it for reasons I couldn't see. "Crown," he'd say, or "cupped," and put it back. I started handing him boards just to be useful, and that's how it happened. I pulled a long 2x10 off the stack, misjudged it completely, and the far end swung down and the whole board levered out of my hands. I didn't even have time to be embarrassed. Gray was just there behind me, one forearm coming across my chest like a bar, his other hand catching the board mid-fall. For about 2 seconds I was pinned between falling lumber and Gray Brennan's arm, his chest solid against my back, and I could feel him breathing, unhurried, like nothing at all was happening. Then he took the board, set it on the cart, and said, "Grab the middle next time." 2 seconds. Never mentioned again. I mentioned it to myself approximately 400 times. On the drive back, 10 silent minutes in, Gray spoke without preamble. "That camera you brought," his eyes stayed on the road. "Does it still shoot?" It took me a second, because it was the first question he'd ever asked me. Ever. In 10 years. "Yeah," I said. "It was my dad's. Film. I develop it myself when I can." Gray nodded, slow, like he was filing that somewhere specific. "Film," he said. "So you can't delete anything?" "No," I said. "You get what you got." He didn't answer. But at the next stop sign, He looked over at me for exactly 1 beat longer than a stop sign requires, and then he drove on, and I spent the rest of the ride looking out the window like the fields were fascinating. That was the first time. I wasn't counting yet. Later, I counted every one. The second one was the boathouse roof, 4 days after. The boathouse needed reshingling before the rental season, a 2-day job, and that morning at breakfast, Gray said, "Charlie, town run, hardware lists on the counter, and Mom wants her cooler back from the Petersons." "Why me?" Charlie said, mouth full. "Because Eli doesn't know where anything is." Which was true, and also, I'd realize later, was the kind of true that hides things. Charlie took the truck keys and drove off happy, because errands meant the drive-through, and I climbed a ladder onto a roof with Gray Brennan, and the whole lake spread out silver behind him. He was a different person up there, not chattier, just legible. He'd tap a shingle and I'd learn to read the tap. He handed me the nail gun once, watched me be terrified of it, took it back without comment, and gave me the chalk line instead, and somehow made that feel like a promotion. Mid-afternoon, a squall came through, not rain, just the wet breath ahead of it, and the shingles went slick, and I was reaching for the bundle at the roof's edge when my sneaker skated out from under me. I want to describe it the way it actually happened, which is that it was over before it started. My foot slipped, the world tilted, and Gray's hand locked around my wrist locked, like a shackle, like something machined before I'd even gotten the gasp out of my chest. He pulled me back onto my feet on the pitch of that roof, easy, and here is the detail I lay awake on. He held on 1 beat too long, balance was back, danger was over. And his hand stayed around my wrist for 1 full extra second, his thumb against my pulse, which was doing about 140, and telling him so. "Okay?" he said. "Yeah." He let go. We worked another hour, and came down when the real rain started, and in the kitchen he put a mug of coffee in front of me. Black, no sugar, which is precisely how I drink it, and understand. I had drunk coffee in front of this man exactly once, that first morning at the lumberyard. Gas station cup, no discussion. I stared at the mug. "How did you—" "I pay attention," Gray said, and walked out to the porch with his own. I stood in that kitchen holding coffee made correctly by a man who'd watched me once, and I felt something I didn't have a name for yet. The closest I can get is this. It's the feeling of realizing you've been legible to someone the whole time you thought you were invisible. It's a good feeling. It's also terrifying. They don't tell you it's both. Now the moment Charlie almost ruined everything by accident. Weeks early, without knowing there was anything to ruin. It was maybe 10 days in. We were sprawled in the den watching a baseball game neither of us cared about, Charlie narrating trades he'd make if anyone were foolish enough to let him, when Gray's circular saw whined from the workshop across the yard, and Charlie glanced toward the sound and said, offhand, like commenting on the score, "Weird though, Gray's done everything alone his whole life. Like, everything. Wouldn't let me hold the flashlight when we were kids." He gestured vaguely at me with the chip bag. "You show up. Suddenly he needs help with everything." My whole body went quiet. That's the only way I can say it. Everything in me stopped moving at once. "Probably, 'cause I'm free labor," I said. "Probably, 'cause you don't talk his ear off." Charlie laughed and threw a chip at the TV over a called strike, and the moment closed over like water, and he never thought about it again. I thought about it all night. I lay in that guest room listening to the lake and prosecuting myself. Because Charlie was right, wasn't he? And also, Charlie was wrong. Had to be wrong. And I ran the evidence both ways until sunrise. The vent, the coffee, the wrist. Objection. He's a careful man. He'd have caught anyone falling off that roof. The knock on my door, and not Charlie's. Objection. Charlie really is useless before 10. That's just data. 1 beat too long. Objection. I counted the beat. Nobody else was counting the beat. The beat exists only in the testimony of a witness who wants it to exist. And under all of it, the verdict I kept returning like a bad penny. A man like Gray Brennan doesn't notice someone like me. Men like that don't. And even in the world where he was Charlie's brother, he was 32. He was, as far as Harlow Lake or anyone else knew, exactly what he looked like, a quiet man who fixed things and went to the 4th of July cookout and would someday, everyone assumed, get around to some lucky woman. There was no version of the math where the answer was me, so I decided the math was wrong and kept doing it anyway. After that night, everything came pre-doubted. That was the summer's real rhythm, not the moments themselves, but the arguing with them. I started waking at 6 without any knock and told myself it was the birds. There started being 2 mugs out on the counter every morning instead of 1, and I told myself he'd always set out 2, I just hadn't noticed. I started photographing him at the saw, on the ladder, squinting down a board, and when he caught me at it, I said, "The light," and he held still, half a second longer, which a person would only do if he didn't mind, and I told myself he was just being polite, and I took the picture, and I doubted it, and I took another. Which brings me to the shed. Harlow Lake had exactly one place to develop film, Kowalski's, on Main, where Marge at the counter looked at every photo that came through and narrated them to the whole town by Friday. I'd sooner have mailed my negatives to a stranger. Some rolls you don't hand to Marge. Some rolls had too much gray on them, and I hadn't let myself think about what that meant, but I'd made the decision just the same. So I mentioned once, at dinner, mostly to Charlie, that I wished I had somewhere dark to develop, and then I forgot I'd said it. 4 days later, I opened the storage shed looking for a hose, and stopped. Inside, someone had cleared the back wall. There was a workbench height counter, sanded smooth, a wooden drying rack, dowels evenly spaced, built for hanging strips of film, built for it, purpose-made, nothing repurposed about it. And over the one small window, a blackout curtain on a proper rod, hemmed straight, edges channeled, so no light leaked. He never asked what any of it was for. He never mentioned building it. When I tried to thank him that night, Gray looked at me for a second and said, "Shed was wasted space," and put his plate in the sink. I stood in that shed a long time, in the dark that a man had built for me without being asked, and I did not let myself finish the thought I was having. Excuse number 3 came at dusk, maybe a week later. "Dock lights out," Gray said from the porch door. Just to me. Charlie was on the phone with Dana from the marina, laughing at something, a mile away in spirit. So I walked down to the dock with him in that long blue Michigan dusk, and Gray flipped the switch on the piling, and the dock light came on, immediately, perfectly. He looked at it. "Huh," he said. "He did not go get tools." He sat down on the end of the dock, and after a second I sat down next to him, and we took off our shoes because the boards were still warm, and put our feet in the lake. The water was cool silk. Somewhere across the lake, a screen door banged and a dog opined about it. The light we'd come to fix glowed uselessly behind us, and neither of us said one word about it. And that silence, the shared, load-bearing dishonesty of that silence, was the closest we'd come yet to admitting anything. Then Gray said the longest thing he'd ever said to me. "You're not like Charlie's other friends." He was looking at the water. "They're loud. He took his time, the way he did with boards, quiet in a way that doesn't ask for anything." I couldn't answer. Anything I said would have asked for something. And then I don't know which of us moved. I've replayed it 100 times and I still don't know our shoulders touched. Just touched. Warm through 2 shirts. Neither of us moved away, and the dock light hummed, and my heart was so loud I was sure the lake could hear it. "Ellie, Gray, you guys gotta see this." Dana sent the dumbest video. Charlie's voice, from the house. The moment didn't fade. It shattered Gray's shoulder gone, his feet out of the water, standing, already reaching for his boots, already the quiet man who fixed things. "Light works," he said, to no one. I sat there alone a second longer with my feet in the dark water. I started counting that night. That night was number 3. The weather turned on a Tuesday. You could smell it before you could see it. That green metal smell the lake gets when something's coming, the water going flat and pewter, the birds shutting up all at once, like someone had asked them to. By 4 o'clock, the sky over the far shore was a bruise, and Gray stood on the porch steps, looking at it the way he looked at lumber, reading it for flaws. "First real one of the season," he said. "Gonna be loud." T. Charlie called at 5 from town. He'd driven in that afternoon to see Dana, And now the county was posting warnings, and half of Main Street was already dark, and Dana's roommate was making chili, and Charlie being Charlie. This took 6 minutes to communicate he was staying over. "Don't burn the house down," he said. "Or do. Actually, it's insured. Love you. Bye." And then, it was just us. Here's the embarrassing thing, and I promised myself I'd tell this story honestly, so my first feeling wasn't nerves, it was disappointment. Because every hour I'd ever gotten alone with Gray Brennan, he had built, arranged, engineered, carpentered into existence, with lumber runs and dock lights, and this one had just fallen on us out of the sky. Nobody had chosen it. I wanted to be chosen. I was 24 years old, standing in a kitchen while the wind picked up, sulking that a storm had done a man's work for him. I didn't get to sulk long. At 6:40, the lights flickered twice, politely, like a warning knock. At 6:41, they went out for good. Gray had the camp stove out of the mudroom before I'd found my phone flashlight. He moved through the dark house like it was lit. He'd built half of it, I suppose it was lit, for him, and set up on the kitchen counter, propped a flashlight against the coffee can, and announced we were having eggs. And this is where I learned the single funniest fact I know about Gray Brennan. The man can dovetail a drawer by hand. I'd watched him plane a door to fit by eye, no measuring, one pass. And he cracked the first egg like he was punishing it. Shell everywhere. He stared into the bowl at the wreckage, genuinely bewildered, and tried a second egg, gentler, which somehow went worse. It collapsed in his fingers like he'd frightened it. "They're not all like this," he said, to the eggs, with real suspicion. "I don't know what did it." And, the flashlight lighting him from below like a campfire story, the third egg he was now regarding as a hostile witness, the pure confusion on a face I'd only ever seen certain, but I laughed. Not my usual laugh, the short one, the one that checks the room first. I laughed from somewhere under my ribs, loud, helpless, hanging onto the counter, and it kept going, and the storm was so loud outside that there was no one to hear it, and so it just kept coming. When I finally stopped, Gray had gone still. He was looking at me across the flashlight beam, with an expression I couldn't file anywhere. "You should laugh like that more," he said. "Like what?" "Like you're not asking permission." The kitchen got very quiet, the way a room does when somebody says something truer than the conversation was rated for. I took the eggs away from him. It gave my hands something to do. We ate at the counter by flashlight, my eggs, his toast, because bread he could handle, and the storm settled in over the lake like it was paying rent. And I noticed the thing I wasn't supposed to notice. Every time the thunder cracked close, Gray's hand tightened on his mug. Not a flinch, nothing you'd catch if you weren't a person who watches hands. Just his knuckles going pale for a second, then letting go, then again at the next one. A big quiet man holding onto a coffee mug like it was holding him back. I didn't say anything, but he caught me not saying it. Of course he did. He caught everything, and he looked at his own hand like it had informed on him. He was quiet for a while. "The rain worked on the windows. I left this town once," he said. "When I was 20, I kept still. You learn that from photography. Some things only happen if you don't move." For someone, the thunder rolled again, farther off now, and his hand did the thing, and he watched it do the thing. I came back alone. That was all of it. He didn't say who. He didn't say what happened. He picked up his toast, and the door he'd opened swung most of the way shut, and I could have pushed, anyone else would have pushed. Charlie would have had a name and a timeline out of him in 90 seconds, or died trying. I didn't push. And I want to be honest about why. Because it isn't that I was polite. It's that I recognized it, the shape of it. A sentence built carefully so it could be true without being open for someone. Not for her, not for him. The pronouns sanded off the way you'd ease a sharp edge. I'd been building sentences like that for 10 years. I could have taught a class. And you don't rattle a locked door when you're standing in front of your own. So I just said, "Okay," and he looked at me quick, sideways, checking, and something in his shoulders came down half an inch. We finished eating in the kind of silence that isn't empty. Afterward, we ended up on the screen porch, because that's where you sit at Harlow Lake when it storms. It's practically municipal law. The rain was coming through the screens as mist, fine as breath, and the lake and the sky had merged into one big dark, and lightning would unstitch them for a second at a time. I had my knees pulled up on the old wicker couch. Gray had the chair, then didn't got up to watch the water, stood at the screen with his arms crossed, a shape cut out of the dark, and I was glad my camera was upstairs, because I would have ruined the moment trying to keep it. The mist found me eventually. I shivered. I didn't say anything. I told you being cold near him felt like an admission. But I heard him move, and then there was flannel settling over my shoulders, warm from his body, smelling like sawdust and rain, and something underneath that was just him, and he did it the way he did everything. Without asking, without a word, as if there'd been a draft, and he'd fixed it. He didn't go back to the chair. He sat down on the couch. Not close. Then the storm went on, and the porch got darker, and somehow it was closer. Not a decision, nothing you could point to, just distance, quietly losing an argument, degree by degree, the way dusk becomes night while you're watching, and you still can't say when. His arm along the back of the couch, my shoulder finding out about it, the rain doing the talking for both of us. His hand was at my shoulder now, barely, the weight of a bird. You should move your hand, I said. I didn't sound sure. I have never sounded less sure of anything in my life. Yeah, Gray said. He didn't move it. The lightning went off somewhere over the far shore, one silent flare, and in it I saw his face, and he was already looking at me, and he had been for a while. I don't know who closed the last of it. I've replayed it more than any other second of my life, and I genuinely don't know, and I've stopped needing to. The kiss was slow. That's the only word I have that's true. Slow, careful, more question than answer. His hand coming up to the side of my jaw like I was something he was checking for level. He kissed the way he talked. Nothing wasted. Everything meant. I heard the rain. I heard the flannel slide off one of my shoulders. I heard, distinctly, 10 years of my own carefulness not making a sound. I pulled back first. I'm your brother's best friend, I said, against the dark. I know. Silence. The rain filled it. The lake filled it. My heart filled it. Doesn't change anything, Gray said. And I remember thinking even then, even with his hand still warm on my jaw, that I didn't know which way he meant it. Doesn't change anything. Nothing will stop this. Or, doesn't change anything. Nothing can come of it. 2 sentences, same words, opposite doors. I was too happy to ask. That's the truth. I was too happy, and I didn't ask. And I'd pay for the not asking all summer. We stayed on that porch a long time. We didn't kiss again. We didn't need to. The one we'd had was still going. Somewhere. The way thunder keeps going. After you hear it. At some point, the storm wore itself out, and the frogs started up, cautious, testing, and Gray said, late, which in his language was a whole paragraph, and we went up the stairs, and at the top of them, we did not know how to say goodnight, and both almost laughed, and didn't, and said it anyway, and went to separate doors. I lay awake in his flannel until almost 4. I wasn't second-guessing. For one night, one single night that summer, the prosecutor in my head had nothing. I just lay there feeling the shape of it. Someone chose me. The storm stranded us, sure, but the hand on my shoulder that he chose. The power came back sometime before dawn. I woke to the hallway light burning outside my door, and the sound of Charlie's Civic in the driveway, resurrected, triumphant, radio audible from upstairs. I came down to a kitchen with all its lights on. Charlie was mid-story, the chili, the roommate, a downed tree on Route 9. He described like war reporting, and Gray was at the stove with his back to me, and he said, "Coffee's on." To the room. To the room. Not to me. There was no me. There was a general kitchen that might contain persons requiring coffee, and he addressed it, and he did not turn around, and when he did turn around, his eyes went over me like I was furniture he'd dusted 100 times, polite, pleasant, even. "Sleep okay?" he asked, and it was the voice you use on your brother's friend, exactly that voice, calibrated to the decimal, and I heard the calibration and understood the whole rule set in 1 second flat. Daylight rules, Charlie rules, town rules. What happened on the porch happened in a country whose borders had closed at sunrise, I said. Slept fine, in the same currency. Charlie talked. The kitchen was bright and loud and normal, and I drank my coffee, Black, no sugar. He'd made it right. That was still true. That stayed true. And I hated how fast I'd understood. That's the part that stung, more than the distance itself. Not that there were rules, that I'd learned them instantly, fluently, without being told, like I'd been studying for this exam my whole life. Because I had. Of course I had. He wasn't the only one who knew that language. He was just the first person I'd ever met who spoke it back. We never talked about the night of the storm, but the flannel stayed in my room. He never asked for it back. I never offered. July, learned to keep our hours. Mornings. Gray taught me the hand plane actually taught me, his hand over mine on the tote, walking my weight through the stroke. Let the tool cut, he'd say against my ear, and shavings would come up in one long curl, and I'd photograph the curl later because I couldn't photograph the ear part. Nights, after Charlie's light went out, we texted from adjacent rooms, 10 feet and one wall apart, typing. You awake? No question mark. Gray didn't spend punctuation. Yeah, some nights just that, and that was somehow plenty, and some nights I fell asleep holding the phone like a hand, that close, and still loving each other through a screen. The roll of film in the shed grew thick. I developed it in the dark he'd built me, and I hung the strips on the drying rack, dripping, and there he was, in negative gray, at the saw, Gray squinting, Gray almost smiling in the last frame before he'd said the light again. Nobody would ever see those photos. That was becoming the theme of the whole enterprise. A love with excellent production values and no distribution. In late July, he drove a delivery downstate 2 days, custom cabinets for a doctor's lake house that had a bigger lake house. Midnight, my phone lit, a photo. 9. The moon over an interstate rest stop, sodium lights below, that white coin above. No caption, no text before or after. I walked out to the end of the dock in my socks and shot the moon over the lake and sent it back. No caption. 3 minutes later, nothing. And the nothing was the message. Received. Same sky. Good night. We never explained it or named it, but from then on it was our language. A moon meant I'm thinking about you where no one can hear me think it. You'd be surprised what 2 careful men can fit inside an unlabeled photograph. Then came the cookout. The Hendricksons hosted it every August. Whole cove invited, and it was I want to be fair to it genuinely nice. Folding tables, corn by the bushel, kids cannonballing off the neighbor dock, somebody's dog working the crowd like a politician. Charlie was in his element, Dana on his arm. Gray manned a grill because a man who can build things will always be handed tongs. It's a law of nature. And there was Mr. Halverson. You need to understand who Halverson was. He owned the lumber and building supply, the only real one for 3 counties. Every board in Gray's workshop came through Halverson's yard at Halverson's contractor price. Every referral for a custom job in that half of the county went through Halverson's counter. He was a big, pink, cheerful man who remembered everyone's name and asked about everyone's mother, and when he talked, the semicircle around the grills arranged itself to listen. You hear about the Kowalski boy? He said, plate in hand, smiling like it was going to be a good one. Marge's grandnephew, the one downstate, brought his friend home last month to meet the folks. A beat, expertly placed. His friend, you follow me. Chuckles. Not cruel ones, that's the thing I need you to hear. Comfortable ones. Weather talk chuckles. Poor Kowalskis can't even sit in their old pew anymore, Halverson said, shaking his head with something that honestly resembled sympathy. Move to the back. Shame. Good people. And then, nothing. Nobody piled on. Nobody said a slur. Nobody would have. It would have been rude. And never, Somebody said, who boy? Somebody's wife said, well, and Halverson was already asking Gray what Cedar was running him these days. And the conversation moved on to lumber prices, like a truck rolling over a small animal it never noticed. I stood there with a burger going cold in my hand, learning something about my country that I'd half known my whole life. The prejudice here doesn't snarl, it grills burgers. It asks about your summer, refills your lemonade, prays for your mother. It just also, gently, smilingly, moves a family to the back pew, and calls it a shame, and it teaches men like Gray Brennan how to vanish in the middle of a crowd, because I was watching Gray. I couldn't not. And Gray laughed along, not big, just right. A smile timed to the room, pitched to the room, a smile I had never once seen on him, not the almost smile from the workshop, not the flashlight and eggs one. A borrowed smile, checked out from some library of smiles for occasions exactly like this, and returned the second Halverson looked away. It was perfect. That's what scared me. 12 years of practice were in that smile. Then, Mrs. Hendrickson, sweet as pie, patting Gray's arm. So, when are you gonna find yourself a wife, Gray Brennan? Handsome thing, like you rattling around that lake house alone. And Gray took half a step back, away from me. I was standing maybe 2 feet off his shoulder, close the way anyone stands at a grill, nothing anyone could see, and before the question even finished landing, before any eye could possibly have moved to measure the distance between us, he'd already opened it. Half a step, smooth as breathing. Insurance against a glance that never came. Haven't met anyone who can put up with me, he said. And the crowd laughed warmly, because they loved him. They truly did. They loved the 2/3 of him he let them have. I found the workshop that night because I couldn't sleep, and neither, evidently, could he. He was standing at the bench, not building anything, which for Gray was practically screaming. I'm not asking you to announce anything, I said. I'd rehearsed it on the walkover and it still came out shaking. No parade. I know where we live. The rehearsal ran out. I don't want to be your secret. There's a difference between private and hidden, Gray, and I know exactly where it is, because I've lived on the wrong side of it my whole life. He was quiet. The shop clock ticked. The silence went on so long it became the answer, and it was the worst possible answer, worse than any sentence he could have built. You don't know this town, he finally said. No, I said. You don't know what it's like to be hidden. Being careful is a thing you do. Being hidden is a thing that's done to you. And he looked at me then, and something in his face came loose, and he sat down on the workbench stool like his strings had been cut, and Gray Brennan gave me the longest speech I ever heard him make. His name was Daniel. He said the name like a door he hadn't opened in years carefully, expecting the hinge to hurt. I was 20, working for my dad's crew, saving to leave. Daniel was summer people. Smart. Loud, actually. Loud like Charlie. A breath that was almost a laugh and didn't survive. We had June, July, half of August. I thought I was careful. I thought I'd invented careful. My father found out. I never learned how. He didn't yell. That would have been... Gray's hands opened, closed. He sat me at the kitchen table and told me I had a choice. His exact words were, no one ever has to know what you almost did. Almost. Like it hadn't happened yet. Like he was offering to unhappen it for me. And Mom in the next room. And Charlie upstairs. Charlie was 12. Eli, he was 12. And he thought I hung the moon. And my father sat there offering me my whole family in one hand. And I took it. I chose the quiet. I called Daniel from the payphone outside Kowalski's because I wouldn't even risk the house line. And that tells you everything, doesn't it? Told him it was done. He didn't cry. I think he'd seen it coming longer than I had. He just said, Gray stopped. 12 years, and he still had to walk up on it slow. He said, you've built your whole life so no one can see you. You'll succeed, and you'll be alone. Then he left. End of August. Never heard from him again. Not a letter, not a rumor. 12 years. He looked at his hands. He was right, on both counts. I'm good at what I do, and I eat dinner alone, and up until this summer, I'd have told you the trade held. Gray. I'm not afraid of this town, Eli. He looked up, and his eyes were terrible, and I mean that word, exactly. They were something you shouldn't have to see on a grown man's face. The town I can carry. I've carried it since I was 20. It's got handles now. I'm afraid of the rerun. I'm afraid I do this again, all of it again. The careful and the quiet, and the half steps, and this time the one who leaves is you. Every instinct I had was to cross that floor and hold him. My body was already leaning into it. And I stood there, leaning, and understood the coldest thing I learned all summer. Understanding someone's fear is not the same as agreeing to live inside it. I could carry his story forever. 40%. I could not carry his half-step. He was asking without asking. He never asked anything out loud for me to move into the architecture he'd built at 20, the one with no windows, and love him there, and call the no windows weather. I did hold him, in the end. He let me, which for Gray was its own confession. His forehead came down on my shoulder and stayed. And I'll tell you the truth I've never said out loud until now. I loved him most, on the exact night I knew I had to leave. I didn't sleep. Around 2, I gave up and walked down to the dock, and Charlie was there, night fishing, alone for once, lying out in the black water, cooler for a footrest. He lives, Charlie said. Pull up a plank. I sat. The lake did its small, dark talking against the pilings. Charlie was quiet, which he could be, at night, fishing the only setting on earth with the volume knob. And I decided, right there, feet hanging over the water I'd learned this whole summer on, tell him. Not about Gray that wasn't only mine to hand over, just my half. Just the room I'd kept locked for 10 years of best friendship. Start there. Start somewhere. My heart was going like the night on the roof, and I heard myself begin. Charlie, there's something I've been meaning to. He turned and got one look at me in the dock light. What's with the face? He said. You look like you're about to confess to a murder. Then, delighted, snapping his fingers. Wait, let me guess. You broke Gray's table saw. Oh, you're a dead man. You're already dead. Walk into the lake now. It's more merciful. I laughed. It came out real. Because he's Charlie. Because 10 years. Because the impression of Gray finding his broken saw was genuinely good. And inside the laugh, the moment passed. I felt it go, felt the sentence I'd loaded just quietly unload itself, felt the door I'd cracked swing shut on its well-oiled, well-practiced hinge. Charlie recast his line. I said something about the mosquitoes. The lake kept talking, and I stopped. I stood one sentence away from the truth. Then I stepped back half a step. The same half step Gray took at the cookout. Turns out I was angry at him for being exactly like me. Charlie came back early on a Thursday. Dana had a shift. The fish were supposedly biting off the North Point, and the tackle box lived in the storage shed had lived there his whole life, since before the shed was anything but a shed. I was in the yard coiling hose when I saw the door standing open, and I knew, the way you know a dropped glass is going to break while it's still in the air. By the time I got there, Charlie was standing in the middle of my darkroom, dead center. Not touching anything. The drying lines ran wall to wall the way I'd strung them and clipped along them. 24 photographs, and the afternoon light was coming through the door past him and lighting them all up at once. All of them one person. Gray bent over the planer, shavings mid-curl. Gray wiping sweat off his face with the hem of his shirt. Stomach bare, eyes shut. Gray at the end of the dock looking out at the lake with his coffee. In that gray hour he thought nobody was up. Gray's hands, just his hands, 4 different frames of just his hands. I'd hung them myself. I knew their order. I watched my best friend read them left to right, like a sentence. Charlie reached up and unclipped one, the dock one, the coffee one, and held it. And when he spoke, his voice wasn't angry. It was worse than angry. It was suspended, like a held breath. Like a thing balanced on an edge, waiting to find out which way it fell. Eli, why do you have this many pictures of my brother? Here's what was available to me, and I want you to see it as clearly as I did, because the whole rest of my life came through this door. The light was good. 3 words. That's all it would take. Charlie would believe me. He always believes me. That's the terrible power you have over someone who trusts you. And it wouldn't even register as a lie in his ears. Because I'd been lying with those exact 3 words all summer. To him, to Gray, mostly to myself. The light. It's about the light. I had the sentence loaded. It was smooth from handling. But I remembered the dock. 2 weeks ago, night fishing, 1 sentence away, and my half step back. I remembered how easily the door had swung shut, how well oiled I'd kept that hinge for 10 years. And I was tired. That's the honest answer. Not brave. Tired. It's not about the light, I said. I like guys, Charlie, and the guy in the pictures I'm in love with him. 1, 1, 1. The shed was very quiet. Outside, the lake went on lapping at things like nothing had happened, because to the lake, nothing had. Charlie looked at the photo in his hand, and then I watched 10 years of best friendship do math at speed, watched it move across his face line by line like a printout. Wait, his eyes came up. The 6 a.m. runs. He never. Gray doesn't take help. Gray doesn't take help from me. His head turned, tracking back through the summer, the dock light. I flipped that switch in June, Eli. That light was never broken a day in its life. The 2 mugs. And he stopped and turned all the way around and looked at the drying rack, the dowels, the purpose-built, evenly spaced dowels. Oh my God, he built this. He built this drying rack, didn't he? Yeah. The blackout curtain. Yeah. Charlie made a sound that wasn't a laugh, though it was shaped like one. He looked at the photograph again. And then the second layer came, and this was the one I'd feared for 10 years, without ever once guessing its actual shape, because I'd braced for disgust, and what came was grief. 10 years, Eli. Quiet. 10 years. You sat through every girl I ever chased, every single one. You did the 2 a.m. phone calls when Becca Larson wrecked me. You know, I wet the bed in 7th grade. You're the only human alive who knows that. I told you everything. I never even decided to. It just you were the place things went. His voice was picking up speed now, Charlie speed, but shaking. And you sat on this for 10 years? What did I do? And right there, his voice broke, clean in half. And I'd known this man a decade and never once heard it do that. What did I ever say that made you think I didn't deserve to know? Was it a joke? Did I make some joke in 10th grade? I'll go back and find it. He pressed his wrist against his mouth for a second. And then it's both of you. The 2 people I love most on this earth, under one roof with me all summer, texting each other through the wall while I'm asleep, probably, and I'm the only one not invited in. I'm the guy you both manage. I'm the risk. Charlie, don't. Not sharp, just full. He sat down on the shed step, all at once, like his knees had voted without him. The photo was still in his hand. He looked at it for a long time, and the lake talked, and when he started again, his voice had gone somewhere else entirely, somewhere younger. When I was 12, Gray changed. He said it to the photograph, not to me. One summer, that's all it took. I've done the math since. It was weeks. Start of June, he's carrying me out to the sandbar on his shoulders, throwing me off, both of us laughing so hard we're drinking lake water. By September, he and Dad won't look at each other. Not a fight, nothing you could point at. They just stopped, for a year, maybe more, and nobody ever told me why. You don't tell the 12-year-old why. You just let him eat dinner in it every night, and figure the temperature's normal. And Gray never came back. Not really. He went from my big brother to a guy who was polite to me. He locked himself in the workshop all day and built things and got quieter every year. And everybody in town said, "Oh, that's just Gray. He's the quiet one." And I wanted to scream, because I knew him before. He wasn't the quiet one. He got quiet. Those are different things, Eli. I grew up next to a guy who was disappearing in slow motion, and I never found out what happened. I only ever saw the results. He looked up at me then, and here came the 4th thing, the real thing, the floor under all of it. So you get why I'm scared, right? His eyes were wet and steady at the same time. Not because you like guys. Jesus, Eli, I could not care less. I mean that with my whole chest. File it, notarize it, done. It's that, for 12 years, I have watched everybody who gets close to my brother end up on the outside of a door. Everybody. Mom, me, whoever it was that summer, because there was somebody. I know that now. I can see the whole shape of it from here. He pushes people out. It's the only thing he builds, faster than furniture. And I don't want to watch that movie again with you in the lead. I don't want to spend September picking up your pieces, man. You're not. His voice caught once more. You're not built to be somebody's secret. You've been one your whole life. I can see that now too. I didn't argue. There was nothing in it to argue with. I know, I said. I'm scared of the exact same thing. And. Coming out to my best friend was nothing like the 10 years of versions I'd rehearsed. No tears, or none that fell, no hug. Just two guys sitting in a shed, surrounded by 24 photographs of the same man, afraid of the same thing. 3 days earlier, I'd been handed one clean chance to tell Charlie the truth. I took it. Now Gray was standing in front of his. It was the next evening, in the kitchen, all three of us, the counter between the brothers, like a net. Charlie had barely spoken to either of us for a day, not cold, just closed for inventory, and I could see the effort in what he did next, the generosity of it. He wasn't springing a trap. He was opening a door and holding it, the way you do for someone carrying something heavy. Gray, level, careful. I'm asking you, once. And I watched Gray understand the whole question. I saw it land, saw him take in Charlie's face, and then, for a quarter of a second, mine and I watched 12 years of practice pick up the tool it knew best. There's nothing between me and Eli. Said plainly, said well, said into the face of a brother who already knew, who had stood in a shed full of photographs, who had built the timeline himself, dock light, by coffee mug. That's what made it unbearable. It wasn't a lie built to deceive. Deception wasn't available. It was a lie built the way you build a wall, for the wall's own sake, because walls were what his hands knew. Charlie didn't yell. I think I could have survived yelling. He just looked at his brother for a long moment, and then he turned and looked at me, and there was no triumph in it. None. No, I win. Only sadness, old and tired and 12 years deep. I told you. This is the movie. This is how it goes. He wasn't lying to Charlie. He was erasing me. I gave it a beat of silence in that kitchen, and then I put my glass in the sink and went upstairs, and that was that. The job offer came 10 days later, and I want this part on the record. I didn't flee. A firm in the city, a real one, photography adjacent enough to matter, an interview I'd done back in June and forgotten to hope about. 2 weeks of summer left. I took it standing up. I packed light. The last thing I did was fold the flannel properly, along its creases, the way you fold something you respect, and leave it on Gray's bed with a single photograph on top. The moon over the lake, from the first night of our code. On the back, in pencil, I never needed you to choose me over this town. I just needed you not to erase me inside this house. Charlie drove me to the bus. Gray stood at the dock, and I watched him in the mirror the whole way up the drive, one shape against the water, not moving. He didn't run after the car. Of course he didn't. Men who take half steps back don't run. Then, 3 months. The job was good. The apartment was small, and mine. The old loneliness came back like it had kept a key, except it didn't fit anymore. Gray had stretched it. There's no crueler gift a person can give you. No texts, no moons. I checked the sky some nights out of habit, and hated myself mildly, and went to bed. I stopped taking pictures. I told myself it was the city light. It wasn't the light. Then, first week of November, Charlie called. We'd talked some short calls, thawing by degrees, but this one had a different weather in it. He got through the preamble fast, for Charlie, and then went half cryptic. Gray's being weird, weirder. He's building something in the workshop. Been at it a month, Eli. A month. Locks it every night. Won't let anyone see it. But Gray's being A1, A10, 1, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. Mom asked flat out at Sunday dinner, and he changed the subject to gutters. I didn't know what he was building. I only knew one thing about Gray Brennan. He never built anything without a reason. The first snow came early that year, a Saturday in the first week of December, the kind of snow that makes a city quiet enough to hear itself. I'd been up since 7 doing nothing in particular. Coffee, window, the radiator ticking. It's one song. The doorbell rang, At 9:40, I want to tell you, I felt something prophetic. I didn't. I assumed it was a package. I opened the door in socks, holding my mug. Gray Brennan stood in the hallway of my apartment building with snow melting on his shoulders. He looked my chest, did something complicated. He looked tired, thinner. 3 months had spent him somewhere. There were new lines at his eyes, and his jaw was rough, and his hands, hanging at his sides, were nicked and bandaged in 2 places, the hands of a man who'd been working past the point where careful runs out. And beside him, on a hand truck, stood a crate, big, taller than my kitchen table, wrapped in canvas and rope, corners padded with moving blankets, tied the way Gray tied things, which is to say, the way ships are tied. "Hi," he said. 280 miles in the first snow of the season, and that was the speech. Some men never change, and God help me, my heart went toward him anyway, like water finding its old channel. I made it stop. I stood in the doorway and did not move aside, and we both noticed that I didn't. "It's heavy," Gray said. "Can I set it down inside? Then I'll go if you want." I moved aside. He walked the crate in with that economy of his, found the empty wall by my window like he'd surveyed the apartment in advance, and maybe he had. Charlie had my address, and he untied the ropes and pulled the canvas, and the blankets came off one by one, and then it was standing in my living room, and I forgot what I'd been planning to feel. It was a workbench, but that word is wrong, the way house is wrong for a home. It was a photographer's workbench. I understood it the way you understand a sentence, all at once. A long working surface at exactly counter height, sealed against chemicals. A cabinet on the left with felt-lined cradles, camera-shaped, lens-shaped. One cradle cut precisely for a Pentax older than me. A rail running above, dowels evenly spaced, for hanging prints to dry. And I knew those dowels. I'd hung a summer's worth of him on their brothers, drawers that slid like breath. Every joint a dovetail, no nails anywhere. 3 months, and I could see all 3 of them in it. Gray. "Wait," he said. "There's the part is under." He crouched, put one bandaged hand flat under the bench top, and looked at me, and waited until I crouched down across from him and looked up at the underside of the thing he'd built, carved into the wood, the whole length of it, line after line in his square, careful lettering. June 14, lumber run. June 18, boathouse roof. June 26, dock light. Date by date, every one, every single excuse of that entire summer, in order, in the sequence I'd counted them, and he had counted them too. He had been counting the whole time, the same as me. 2 people keeping the same secret ledger on opposite sides of the same wall. July, 2 hinges that weren't loose. July 9, the storm. The storm was in there. The night that had no excuse. The night the sky did it for us, carved in with the rest, because it belonged with the rest. Down the length of the bench, all summer long, ending in August, ending where we ended. Read the underside of a table and hold your voice steady. I couldn't. I didn't try. I'm not good at saying things. "Eli," Gray said quietly, from a foot away, under the bench he'd built. Both of us folded down there like kids in a fort, so I carved them. I came up too fast and turned to the window because I needed the snow, needed something cold and neutral to look at, and behind me he stood up too, and then he said it. The thing I'd waited all summer to understand. He said it slowly, like he'd carved this too, like he'd been shaping it for 3 months along with the wood. "All summer, I wasn't looking for ways to be alone with you. I was looking for ways to be near you. Alone was just the only way I dared." 10. The radiator ticked. The snow came down, and here's where I have to be honest, because the easy version of this story ends right there, with me turning around and falling into him, and the easy version is a lie. I didn't turn around. I stood at my window with my eyes burning, and the whole summer in my throat, and what came out of me was not forgiveness. You erased me. My voice was low, and it shook, and I let it. In front of Charlie. "He gave you the door, Gray. He held it open. He was kinder to you in that kitchen than anyone's ever been to me. And you looked at him knowing he knew, and you said there was nothing. I turned around then. I stood right there. There's nothing between me and Eli. You made me nothing, in a room I was standing in. A bench doesn't fix that. Dovetails don't fix that. WHO. I know. No flinch. No excuses. Queuing up behind his eyes. He took it standing, and he nodded, once. It doesn't. I didn't bring it to fix that. I brought it because it was the truest thing I owned. It doesn't. The snow kept on. He looked down at his hands, those nicked, spent, 3 months older hands, and turned them over like they belonged to someone he was still getting to know. I told Charlie, he said, everything. Daniel, Dad, the summer. You. A breath. Before I drove up, not after before, so that this, the smallest gesture, the crate, the room, me, wouldn't be anyone's secret. Whatever happened here today, I wasn't going to carry it home hidden. I'm done building rooms with no windows. It took me 12 years, and I built one around the best thing that ever walked into my life, and he stopped. Started again, lower. You did it back in the summer, in the shed. Charlie told me how that you had the else.I loaded, and you put it down. You were braver than me inside my own house. Eli. It took me 3 months and a workbench to catch up. My phone buzzed on the counter. I almost didn't look. I looked. Charlie. He told me everything. Still mad at both of you. But if you send him back out in the snow, you're officially worse than he is. And I laughed. It broke out of me straight through the tears. That same underneath the ribs laugh from the night of the eggs. The one that doesn't ask permission, laughing and crying at once in my sock feet, while Gray Brennan stood in my living room next to a bench with our whole summer carved under it, not knowing what the phone had said, waiting out my weather like he waited out everything. Charlie, I explained, uselessly, wiping my face. Yeah, Gray said, that tracks. I didn't cross the room. I want that on the record too. What happened is smaller than that and bigger than that. Gray stepped to the bench, his side of it, and laid his hand on the surface, palm up, in the space between us. He didn't reach. He didn't ask. He didn't say a word. Just his open hand on the wood he'd spent 3 months telling the truth into. Offered the way you offer things to something wild. Here, if you want. Your call. Entirely yours. The snow filled the window. I looked at that hand. A long time. Long enough to cost him something. And I let it cost him, because it had cost me. Then, I put my hand in it. His fingers closed slow, like he didn't quite believe in the weight of what they held. And when we kissed the first kiss of my life, it was nothing like the porch. The porch was a question in the dark. This was unhurried and unhidden, morning light and snow light full on both of us, nothing arranging our privacy. No storm to blame, just 2 grown men in a bright room choosing each other on purpose, knowing exactly what it costs, and paying it, and finding it cheap at the price. We stood there a long time, his forehead against mine, my hand still in his on the workbench. Stay for coffee, I said. Yeah, said Gray. Whole paragraphs in it. Let me tell you about the next summer. The lake house got finished, really finished, and listed in June, and it rented every single week. Partly because it's beautiful, and partly, I'll just say it, because the listing photos were excellent. I shot them. My prints hang on every wall of that house now, the lake at dusk, the boathouse, the long curl of a wood shaving lit from the side, and strangers pay to sleep surrounded by them, which is the funniest outcome available to a roll of film I once developed in secret behind a blackout curtain. Gray rebuilt the dock in July, new boards blonde as bread, and I handed him things and got the middle right every time. And at the Hendricksons' cookout, first Saturday of August, 1 year almost to the day, burgers, corn, the dog still working the crowd, Halverson still large and pink by the grills, Gray Brennan reached over in front of the entire cove and took my hand, and didn't let go. I felt the ripple move through that yard, a pause here, a glance there, one conversation that lost its footing and found it again. Mrs. Hendrickson blinked twice and then asked me, gamely, how I liked my burgers done. Halverson looked, and looked away, and talked lumber prices, to a man on his left. There's more to tell about that town, and what held, and what didn't. Some accounts got quieter. One church pew sat differently, and the phone in Gray's workshop kept ringing anyway, because a perfect dovetail argues better than anybody's sermon. But that's another story. What I'll keep from that afternoon is the weight of his hand, not gripping, just staying. all the way till dark. And Charlie, who'd spent a year earning the right, raised his lemonade to the two of us in front of God and the Hendricksons and everybody, and delivered the toast he had absolutely been saving. If you two get married, I'm the brother and the best man. Both jobs. So which one of you is paying my bar tab? Think carefully. I've seen everything. Late that night, when the cookout had burned down to citronella and taillights, Gray and I walked out to the end of our new dock, the exact spot. Excuse number 3. The light that was never broken. The light he never did get around to fixing. Out of what I can only call sentiment. We took off our shoes. Feet in the water, warm off the top, cool underneath. The whole lake breathing against the pilings. The moon came up over the far shore, big and low and shameless. I raised the camera, his cradle kept, felt lined, my father's camera, and framed it, the old habit, the old code. And before the shutter clicked, Gray's arm came around me and pulled me into his shoulder, unhurried, unhidden, and I took the picture like that, crooked, perfect. The moon we didn't have to send. And for the first time in a long, long time, neither of us had to be lonely. Some people love you out loud. And some people love you through every clumsy excuse to stand near you until the day they're brave enough to stand beside you in the light. Thanks for spending this summer at Harlow Lake with me. If this story found you somewhere it needed to, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and leave a comment telling me where in the world you're listening from. I read every single one. Good night, you guys. Go easy on each other.